Un croissant s'il vous plaît.
Bonjour d'abord.
Bonjour, un croissant s'il vous plaît.
Bonjour, bien sûr. Ce sera 1,50 €.
This visitor tried his best French to order a croissant. His pronunciation wasn't perfect, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that he forgot one important thing. In France, almost every interaction starts with a bonjour. And that's just one of many French habits that can surprise visitors.
Why doesn't the waiter bring the bill?
You're not asking me for a tip?
Why is nobody offering to help me? And why does this shop seem to be closed every time I need it?
Well, today we're going to look at 16 French habits that often surprise visitors, and more importantly, the cultural logic behind them. Bonjour, merci. Bonjour. Let's start with the habit we've just seen. I know I keep saying that, but if there's one word you should remember before visiting France, it's bonjour. Bonjour! Whether you're entering a bakery, a pharmacy, a restaurant, a doctor's waiting room, or even asking somebody for directions, a greeting almost always comes first. To many French people, saying bonjour is simply basic politeness. It's a way of acknowledging the other person before asking for something. In fact, many French people would rather hear a badly pronounced bonjour than perfect French without one. And once you've learned that little rule, you'll often notice that people suddenly seem much friendlier. Here's another habit that surprises many visitors. French people generally don't engage in small talk as much as people do in some other countries. Let's imagine you're waiting at a bus stop. The person next to you looks friendly, so you say,
Beautiful weather today, don't you think?
in some countries, that might be the beginning of a 5-minute conversation. But in France, you may simply get, Ouais, pas mal. And that's the end of it. The same thing often happens in restaurants. In some countries, a waiter might stop by your table, ask where you're from, how your day is going, or engage in a little conversation. In France, that happens much less often. French people generally don't assume that strangers want to chat. In fact, many French people feel they're being polite by not invading your personal space. What may seem cold to some visitors often feels respectful to a French person. It's one of those situations where the exact same behavior can be interpreted very differently depending on the culture you grew up in. I've heard many visitors say, Nobody came to help me. Well, in France, that's often intentional. Most French customers prefer to browse quietly and ask for help only when they need it. What may feel like poor service to an American customer can actually feel like excellent service to a French one. Let's say you're walking on a street in the Latin Quarter neighborhood. You're happy, your heart feels warm, you make eye contact with someone, you smile. They don't. For many visitors, that can feel a little unfriendly. But in France, smiling is often reserved for situations where some interaction already exists. That's not the case in the street. A smile doesn't necessarily mean the same thing on both sides of borders. Imagine you're having dinner with French friends. You ask, how much do you earn? Or, what religion are you? You may notice the atmosphere changing slightly. In France, both money and religion are often considered private matters. It's not taboo. It's just personal. During that same dinner, you may discover how true is this famous quote by French writer Sylvain Tesson. France is a paradise inhabited by people who think they are living in hell. If you're talking with true French people, you'll hear complaints about politics, taxes, public transport, football, and, of course, the weather. Sometimes all during the same conversation. And yet, many of the people complaining are perfectly happy. You finally found the perfect shop in Paris. You arrive there, but it's closed. Maybe it's Sunday, or Monday, or maybe it's lunchtime. French opening hours can occasionally feel like a treasure hunt. Many visitors are surprised that businesses don't necessarily stay open whenever customers might want them to. My tip here? Google Maps will almost always give you the correct opening hours. It's 3:15 in the afternoon. You're hungry? So you're looking for a local restaurant on your favorite app. They're all closed. France may seem to take meal times too seriously. Lunch is lunch, from noon to 3 p.m. at the latest, and dinner is dinner, from 7 p.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. And most restaurants will not serve continuously between lunch and dinner. So if you feel hungry in the afternoon, you'd better look for the few restaurants that offer service continu, like most brasseries and some bistros in touristy neighborhoods. This habit is particularly different than what you'd find in North America. Walk through Paris and you'll notice something. Compared to the US, you will see fewer people eating while walking, eating on public transport, carrying giant drinks, or constantly snacking. Traditionally, French eating habits revolve around meals rather than continuous grazing. Yes, in a few restaurants you'll find children's menu, usually with simpler dishes and a drink included. But here's what often surprises visitors. Sit next to a French family in a restaurant and you'll frequently see children eating exactly the same food as their parents. Fish, duck confit, even tartare. French children are often introduced to adult foods from a very young age, and many French parents see learning to enjoy different foods as part of growing up. So don't be surprised if you see a 10-year-old happily eating something that many adults back home wouldn't touch. Yes, even broccoli or roquefort.
I'd like the chef salad, please, with the oil and vinegar on the side and the apple pie a la mode.
Chef and apple a la mode.
But I'd like the pie heated, and I don't want the ice cream on top. I want it on the side, and I'd like strawberry instead of vanilla if you have it. If not, then no ice cream, just whipped cream, but only if it's real. If it's out of a can, then nothing.
Let's say you're ordering a salad. In some countries, it's perfectly normal to ask no onions, dressing on the side, extra cheese, and perhaps substitute one ingredient for another. In France, some restaurants will happily accommodate your request, but most French people will simply order the dish as it's written on the menu. The idea is that the chef designed the dish to be enjoyed a certain way. That's not to say modifications are impossible. Just don't be surprised if your request is occasionally met with a slightly puzzled look. For many French people, ordering from a menu isn't about building your own meal. It's about trusting the chef. You've just finished a wonderful meal in Paris. You've had your dessert, you've finished your coffee. And now, you're waiting for the bill. 5 minutes go by. 10 minutes go by. Still no bill. Don't worry, the waiter hasn't forgotten you. In France, bringing the bill before you ask for it can actually be considered a little rude. The idea is simple. You're not being rushed. The table is yours for as long as you want it. So when you're ready to leave, simply ask "L'addition s'il vous plaît?" and the bill will arrive shortly. If nobody brings you the bill, that's because French people often see meals a little differently. In many countries, a meal is primarily about eating. In France, it's also about spending time together. It's not unusual for friends or family to spend 2, 3, or even 4 hours around the same table. In fact, I've already spent more than 4 hours at a 3-star Michelin restaurant in France. And no, the waiter hadn't forgotten us. Quite the opposite. That's simply how long the experience lasted. Lunch can easily turn into coffee. Coffee can turn into conversation. And conversation can last much longer than anyone originally planned. In fact, there's a little joke in France when you're invited to somebody's home for dinner. You know when you are arriving, but you never know when you're leaving. French meals are often as much about the company as they are about the food. So if you notice people lingering over a coffee long after they've finished eating, don't assume they're waiting for something. They're probably exactly where they want to be. Another thing that surprises many visitors is tipping. In France, service is already included in the price you pay. In fact, you'll often see the word service compris printed on the menu. That doesn't mean people never leave a tip, quite the opposite. If the service was good, many French people will leave €1 or 2, round up the bill, or leave a small amount on the table. The difference is that tipping is purely a gesture of appreciation for the service received, and never an obligation. Nobody expects you to leave 15, 20 or 25% of the bill. And most French people are quite uncomfortable with permanent terminals asking customers to choose a tip before they've even paid. Personally, I never press those buttons. If I want to leave a tip, I'll leave some cash on the table instead. And in my case, it would never be more than 10% of the bill. Here's another one that could surprise some visitors. In France, 3 refills are not a thing. As a matter of fact, they are even illegal for sodas. If you order a second Coke, you'll pay for a second Coke. And if you order a second coffee, you'll pay for the second coffee. The 2 notable exceptions are tap water and bread, both of which are provided free of charge in all restaurants. Here's one that many visitors notice almost immediately. In France, drinks often come with little ice or no ice at all, even in the middle of summer. Order a Coke and you may get 2 or 3 ice cubes. And if you ask for a carafe d'eau, don't expect it to come full of ice either. Most of the time, however, the water will have been kept in a refrigerator so that it's pleasantly cool. In fact, many French people are surprised when they travel abroad and receive a drink that's half beverage and half ice. So if you like your drinks extra cold, don't hesitate to ask for more ice. Just don't be surprised if it isn't served automatically. So there you have it, 16 French habits that often surprise visitors. Of course, I could have gone much further. I could have mentioned the fact that many French workers think nothing of having a glass of wine or a beer with lunch before returning to work. Or that drinking alcohol in public is often perfectly legal in France, whether that's a picnic by the Seine or a glass of champagne in a park. The important thing to remember is that most of these habits aren't better or worse than what you'll find elsewhere, They are simply different. And once you understand the logic behind them, many things that initially seem strange suddenly start making a lot more sense. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these French habits surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.